What up, Robert G, Daniel, Ruiz, all friends of the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's warm. Yeah, it's really warm out here. That's why you probably can hear the air. And I have very little tolerance for warmth and heat. I gotta adjust to it. So that's why I got that air on in the background. All right, so I got this plane here. This Shelton plane. It was my great grandfather's plane. It's really in good condition. The blade isn't even that dull. But it definitely needs a sharpening, and it's rusty. So I put some rust remover on it. That was the first thing I did. I soaked it in that stuff for a minute there. Now I'm just scrubbing off that excess rust, and I'm gonna sharpen it. Yeah, this is one of the ones that's been sitting up there on the shelf in my folks' house for a very long time. I even worked on my draw knife today. I've got a bunch of them, man. Here's one. Here's another. This is another blade that I have in that bag right now. This is my great grandfather, one of his block planes. Nice to have those tools, heirloom tools like that. I feel lucky to have that. But this one today that we're doing is this Shelton plane right here. And I'm going to keep my angle at 30 degrees here to do it. I got most of that rust off. I think we're going to see how I'm going to put a little bit of this olive oil up on the block. Start with this 800 side here. I want my little leather strap. Where do I put that? Buckskin strap around here somewhere, but I'll use the towel for now. I don't want to interrupt. Just look for one little thing I'm picky about. Kind of the way I got this angle here is difficult, but it's kind of for the live, so. It already feels pretty sharp. Just needed a touch up after 100 years. But we'll see once we put it in the device whether the thing is really, whether I've done a good job. Oh yeah, I was using a file on my draw knife earlier very carefully because it just had some spots that were so rough. Generally they tell you to use a grinding wheel. I also have a belt sander I could probably use, but I went ahead and just did it manually with a file, just very carefully, lightly with the file flat. I don't like how the paper is pulling a little bit because Yeah, I know. It's built, these tools have built a lot of stuff. He was a functional woodworker, so he wasn't doing it for YouTube and he didn't have a perfect shop, but he was an excellent woodworker and built most of his furniture, you know, all the family's tables and chairs and everything. I showed you all that marking gauge yesterday. That marking gauge is had a little thing broken on. I think he was cutting round things with that marking gauge too. Uh, it had this hole on one side, made me think he was using it like a compass. Could have been doing masonry with it. I have some, you know, masons in my family line, or you know, that were good at it, uh, good at masonry. Also Freemasons, but uh, how's everybody doing? But what I was responding to was Ruiz said, if that tool could talk, the stories it would tell. Yeah, I mean it is so old. It's a very old tool, bro. Since it's so old, yeah, it is definitely old. And I've got a bunch of them too, man. I brought a lot of those tools, so I'm gonna be using. It's gonna be some heirloom tools being used on stuff here. I want to use this Shelton plane. I don't have a plane of that size around, so would like to use it. I would like to find my stropping leather too. I had this piece of buckskin that I was using to strop, and I really feel like it makes a better strop. I am not an expert at sharpening planes. I sharpened my other one pretty well though, so I felt enough confidence to do this. We'll see whether that was foolhardy confidence here in a little bit. The stropping is really important because those little grains of metal that get caught in there prevent the blade from being sharp, you know, and also kind of, I think they foul it too, but I have to look up exactly why we strop. You know, there's reasons why you use, like people use leather. Um, Not sure how I completely understand the question, but like cracks, yeah. The little shreds are what you're trying to get off the metal because I think it may foul your blade if you leave those little shreds on there. I really shouldn't be saying anything unless I look this up. You can already see that blade starting to come out, like the way that it looks like a blade should look. Feels sharper too. So we're getting there. We're making progress. This is maybe the sharpening is the easy part because when you put it back into the planer housing and body, you know, getting it straight in there can be pretty tricky. This is a 1,000 grit. I think I put 800 grit over this. I thought that's what it was, but I guess it's the block says 1,000, so it must be 1,000. And I use olive oil to strop, by the way. That's my fluid that I use. No. The question was, are the blades universal? Do they fit all bodies? And the answer is no. And I'll show you my next blade for that larger plane that you just saw. Here's the blade for this one. I don't like to get this stuff on my fingers very much, but here's the blade for the next one. It's got the anti-rust stuff on it right now. It's a blade, and I forget what they call this other thing on the other side of it. It's not the blade that holds it in place. But yeah. Since I took that out, I'm going to give it a scrub and put it back in the bag. And that anti-rust stuff, probably overnight. We'll see. It's almost taking the hairs off my arm. I know that's not how you're supposed to test, but that's the way I used to test stuff. Sometimes I think if I understand your question, it says, so when you buy them, Calvin, is it important to work them as they say to be able to use them first, right? So I think your question, if I understand, is should you sharpen a tool when you just get it? And the answer, it depends. Some tools come factory sharpened very, very well, like those Narex chisels. And then some tools that you get, like this is an old tool that was passed down to me that certainly needed to be sharpened. Like there's no doubt. Um, some of the planes that you get nowadays, the higher end planes, they come pretty sharp. So you don't have to sharpen them right away. But yes, you do have to do routine maintenance on planes. Whenever you use a tool, it dulls, especially if you're using it on, harder woods, wood that has glue in it, wood that has knots in it. If it hits anything, which can be fatal for a plane, if you hit something metal with it and mess the blade up, it may be done, or you have to replace the blade, which can be extremely difficult nowadays. These antique planes, a lot of times they come without the frog or the shoe. That's that part I was trying to remember a minute ago. Or they come without the blade, and I've bought them like that before and then regretted it because you can't find anybody who has the final piece of it. So that kind of answers your question: is all the blades universal? And the answer is absolutely not. Each one has its own kind of blade with it. For one of these planes, we're actually going to build a little. See the little knob here? The knob is missing, so I want to actually use the draw knife and the bandsaw and cut myself another knob for it. Um, something I've never done before, so it'll probably put my skills to the test. Got mosquitoes in here. That's how good the weather is, and they're biting me through the off that I sprayed on myself. And just like I do with knives, I put a fair amount of pressure down on when I'm sharpening them. If you don't apply some pressure, you won't get much progress. So, well, we'll see, because this will be the first real antique plane that I've used, because I've just looked at them on the shelf for years. I've never actually tried to use them. Um, I've only used like new planes. So, to answer your question, I think we'll have to see whether I prefer the antique ones or not. We got 3 different projects we're working on right now here in Dad's Workshop. Welcome to Dad's Workshop. Right now, we're sharpening the blade from this old Shelton plane here. I looked them up yesterday. This is my great-grandfather's plane, probably from the 30s. He would have been an older man. My great-grandfather would be, like older than your great-grandfather. I can almost guarantee you all. There's some gap in the generations of my family that makes my great-grandfather would be like 150 years old or something insane right now. So he would have been an older man when he acquired this plane if it was from the 1930s, which is crazy since that's almost 100 years ago. Maybe he just picked up woodworking as a middle-aged guy. What kind of craziness is that, you know? I think what you mean by camber, you mean like a little bit of. You're a metalworking guy, Robert. So you guys know a lot more about planes than me. Maybe it may be a high angle plane. I looked at angles before I sharpened it though. If I'm looking at this with a protractor here, yeah, it's about 30 degrees, and that's the way my block is. Right? It's pretty accurate right there. I'm looking at the protractor. I've got 32 degrees on the protractor. So that's similar to this block that I've cut right here, that prefab to that. So yeah, good point. Yeah, definitely. In some ways, but like I kind of yearn for those times because people made stuff to a high quality, you know, and like when the only people that would be building a bed like this that I can think of off the top of my head are people in Alaska who don't have access to the same kind of material. They usually have lumber mills if they're out in the wilderness, and they can cut their own lumber, but they can't go and get a bunch of fasteners, and they like stuff the traditional way. People who move to Alaska typically like traditional stuff. They like to live the homestead lifestyle, and they like to do stuff themselves. They're not going to order a IKEA bed, and they're going to build it themselves. So I wonder how many Alaskan people I've had pop through my live stream. They're probably more advanced on this stuff even than I am, even if it's just a layman, because it's their survival basically on the line, or their comfort. You're either building for survival up there, or you're building for comfort because you've got the survival thing nailed down. Like you built yourself a cabin, you're just building on your cabin, you know. Thank you. Yeah, my grandfather was a decent man. He had some struggles. He had a lot of kids. So, and his young wife died when she had my grandmother. So my great grandmother died the day that my grandmother was born, which was in April of 1918. So my grandmother, if she was still alive, would be, she died in 2011. She was like 93. Uh, she would be over 100. That's my grandma, who I love and knew very well. Uh, Her mother died in birth, childbirth for her. And then he basically passed off my grandmother, the baby, because he couldn't take care of her, to who is basically my second cousin, and he raised her. So I refer to him as my great grandfather, but really in reality, he's more like a cousin twice removed. Yep, living off the land. And they really were pioneers living in northern Iowa and Minnesota. Um, you know, they were pioneer people. Even my grandmother did stuff the old-fashioned way. Had an eighth grade education. You know. It's biting when I'm touching it a little more, which makes me think it's getting sharper. Now, Hank, you're gonna have to pardon this question, but camber, you mean like a micro bevel? If you're still there, that's what you're. Okay, so yes, here's the way that the blade goes down under the frog in this plane right here. To answer your question, Hank, I'll put it in a second. It's not sharp enough to use. I can tell that for sure. At least I don't think so. The air on the side of caution part of me thinks that this thing is not. I'm going to go back to 800. In fact, here. I've been like anti YouTube. Uh, like a lot of the stuff you see me do on here, I did not YouTube at first. I'm going by my instinct and what I was taught when I was younger. That's why, some stuff I've caught myself being incorrect about. For example, using my arm hair as a gauge to how sharp my tools are. You're supposed to use wood for that. I learned that actually the hard way recently. Gave myself a pretty nasty rash by putting chisels against it. I actually wouldn't know how much the blade was. So the Ruiz asked, how much does a blade for that tool run nowadays? I don't know. The tool itself you can find in poor condition for about $60 or $70. At least that's what I found them online. At least that was the bid on eBay. They could go up more from that. I imagine they do because they're well-made tools from made in the USA by a craft like tool maker that's got a good reputation. So. Welcome to Dad's Workshop. We have a couple projects. So what I was getting to before was that we also worked on a mallet yesterday and put together my broken mallet. Um, so I'm going to, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Robert. Thanks for that input. Robert said camber is putting more pressure for free strokes, I think, on each side. Slightly angle the edge of the iron so that you don't get points digging into the workpiece. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. I generally, if we're talking about the same thing, I take whatever I'm sharpening and put the flat side down to it and do a few strokes like that to make sure that side is flat. I don't angle it and do, I probably should. I'm gonna look it up, but I think what you're talking about is doing another angle from the bottom basically and putting a slight angle up. I feel like I would mess the blade up unless I set an angle, took a piece of wood and set like a template piece down. Oh yeah, a few. Yes. So what I do, and I don't know if you see that, is I take the blade and put it flat and pull it, and then take my stropping, in this case my piece of stropping leather, and wipe that down too. But I don't spend a lot of time on that. It's really just to make sure that the backside has no imperfections and stuff like that, like you say, to mess the workpiece up. So as a musician, I'm a read musician. I can read. I can also play by ear. But when it comes to woodworking, I play by ear a lot, if that makes sense. It's a lot of playing by ear. And it's not that lack of preparation. It's that kind of makes me like the project. When I have a set of plans, I might actually just think it's boring. But when I have to create it from the ground up and figure out these problems, solutions to problems, like for example, my tools are dull and I got to figure out how to make this joint work on the end of it. I like those kind of problems, even though they can be headaches sometimes. I appreciate that, the headache that it gives me. Usually on the other side, I come out a stronger person because I learned to do things the right way. Like I told people the other day, um, getting a handcrafted bunk bed, if you're going to do that, it's going to cost you between $3,000 and $10,000. It's not going to be cheap, but you could build a nice bunk bed yourself. That's what we've been doing on the channel. So I think I need to use my angle block again here. Starting to feel like it's getting curved, and I don't want that to happen. I might switch to stones too, because I noticed with this paper that the paper its grit wears out, and then you're just kind of um, pissing in the wind, for lack of a better expression. Hope I don't lose my monetization for that. Ruiz, big time friend of the show, man. Appreciate you, man. Hank also, shout out Hank, shout out Robert, shout out Ruiz, all my regulars in here tonight. Appreciate all y'all. Make sure that all the new folks check out Dad's Workshop. We got lots of videos, lots of this kind of stuff, but also funny videos of, I do stuff occasionally. I make a video just for fun, but we got a lot of this kind of content here where we restore tools, restore chests. Somebody was watching that antique chest video big time today. That one got a lot of views. Uh, yeah, I check to see what people watch. It might have been when I first had Hank pop in. Hank's been around for a minute. Hank's a long time friend of the show. Appreciate you, Hank. Yeah, Hank's gone through and watched those videos. You can kind of see how our story started, and I even left. I started out by doing exercise videos because I'm an exercise enthusiast, and you know, made videos on various topics. there for the last year, and then kind of settled into doing woodwork and restoration stuff. It's just kind of how I ended up here, just organically. All right, well, we can try to put this thing in. I don't think it's sharp enough yet. I think it needs more work than that, which is not surprising because these blades, they last for a long time. By the way, the box that I'm working on is a dovetail box that I built, and I used old heart pine siding from this shack that was in the woods to make the bottom. That's why it looks so rough and kind of ugly on the bottom. It's southern yellow pine, but then the bottom is like a heart pine siding that I took from a house. And see, I just on the way in, I touched the blade against it. You have to be careful on the way in that you don't hit the blade against something and dull your blade. This is trickier than it would seem. These simpler planes, the blade doesn't lock in as easy either. I should have studied the plane a little more before I took it apart. That might make sense right there, wouldn't it? Okay, I'm starting to make sense of it now. Somebody's probably giving me instructions. Okay. I need instructions, Hank. There we go. It almost sets the angle by that. Now the blade is not far enough down, so we need to push the blade down slightly. I don't know if you ever seen any of these videos on YouTube of people with these planer jigs that they have, where the planer sits in the side of it and goes like, it's pretty amazing. It's how they get straight edges on the end of their boards. It's pretty cool. Woodworkers got cool things they work on with. All right, blade's not straight. I can almost assure you that this blade is not sharp enough to operate. the protrusion on the bottom should really just be a millimeter or two, a very small amount. Oh, I lost it. It's like a delicate dance here. Why do I feel like putting a plane together is harder than cutting a dovetail? Well, I mean, it's not sharp, but it's like in the right position. It's better than when I got it, right? So the thing is, and you can see the blade coming out the bottom there, it's not a lot of protrusion there. It's just like a millimeter or so, but based on the effort I have to put into it, you know, I think, let me take a piece of wood and try it out. Take this piece of cherry. I got a scrap of cherry that I have right here. It's not bad. It's getting there. It's not there. But it's taking material off, right? It's just a matter of it being sharper because it's. And now that I know the layout of the plane, but if Hank said this the other day, if you're working hard on a piece to plane it, if it's making you tired, I think it was Hank that said this. One of my viewers said this. If you're working real hard with the plane, like putting a lot of effort into moving it, it's not sharp enough. You know? I hate having sausage fingers. It's a real thing. Yes, it is a real thing. I guess that's aimed at me a little bit. I'll take it, Ruiz. I take the good with the bad. Yeah, I think it needs more sharpening. But it's kind of calibrated and put in place right. And you can see the blade is even. Well, maybe not. Maybe that right side's coming out a bit. I would say probably it needs a little bit more, maybe 1500. I'll get my other sharpening board out. And then I want to move on to my next thing. This is a Shelton plane. I don't know the model. They have like Shelton 60s, one of the ones I read about quite a bit yesterday. Yeah, it is. It's an art because once you get it right, it's a really great tool. You know. I should have clamped that side of my board down too. I will. So the beam I have moves, and the reason is so I can switch that paper when I need to. Sorry to see you go, Hank. Love to have you here. Appreciate you being here. Friend of the show saying goodbye. Hank, check, come back. Hopefully you come back tomorrow. See you tomorrow. If not, we'll see you next Monday. Appreciate you, man. Friend of the show, Hank. Always got good input. I need to keep that angle. Welcome to Dad's Workshop, where we do all kinds of stuff involved with restoring and woodwork, wood tools, tools in general. Right now we're working on this Shelton plane, and I can tell it's getting sharper. I can feel it getting sharper on my thumb. That's good. I guess it needed just some 1500, I think. We're gonna get it razor sharp so that it just takes that wood off like a hot knife through butter. That's the idea. Probably nearly 100 years since this blade has been sharpened or used. So it's not in bad condition for 100 years. Try to take one of the tools you get from Lowe's, who's not a sponsor. So I will easily say that many of my tools from Lowe's have a poor quality of metal. And, you could probably get better antique tools. A lot of my best tools are antique tools that I just, I restored them, like some of my chisels. My hewing hatchet, which I love. We're going to put this project aside, so this Shelton plane, I'll take a look at it again tomorrow. We could probably take a look on the live. It's getting sharper. It's not there yet. Like I said, after 100 years of sitting around, it was looking pretty bad. It was completely rusted. Probably the protocol here is to put the blade in first, then the frog. Frog needs to go forward another little bit. Let's try this. So our Shelton plane will be worked on again next time. We'll take a look at that one again. I got another one of those, needs another knob. I got another blade that needs to be de-rusted and put into this other block plane that I have. It's a wood plane. This one here. Where everything seems to be intact. A little more complex plane, different style frog. The blade I told you is in that bag right now. The foot of this plane seems to be fairly flat. I probably should look at it, maybe a little bit of curvature to it. That is very important. One of the setbacks of these wood planes is that the flatness of the bottom is affected, and that has to be flat. Here's my other Shelton plane. It is intact other than this knob here, which we will build. We'll make another knob. I could probably find someone online who has one. You can see what the blade looked like beforehand, and that the shoe, or the bottom of this not the shoe, the foot plate, whatever they call it, the bottom thing is actually flat on this plane. And favorite tool, Ruth says, what is my favorite tool? I think my favorite tool is, man, that's tough. Probably my framing chisels. They're very satisfying to use. You know, when you have them nice and sharp, they just cut right through the wood in a big way, large amounts of wood. Let's work on my mallet from yesterday. I took it to the bandsaw before we had live today. This is maple and ash. The handle is made out of ash. The mallet head is made out of maple. It was a little offline, so I took it through the bandsaw. So now it's been glued up. It is ready to go. But what I decided to do, just to make it look a little bit sexier, was I cut a piece of cherry to laminate to the handle here, to kind of make the handle look a little sexier. And then I'm going to do a piece of walnut on the other side, so it'll have a little like three-tone look to it, which is definitely my style. So we're going to laminate this and clamp this up to the handle here, so that, and we'll sand it, and it'll look really good when it's finished. Even though it's a little rough looking now, it's going to be trimmed up and will look good. So let me go get some glue. We'll do that next. I like to have these rubber pads for these kind of projects because it's kind of a piece of fine woodworking, and the more you don't have those on here, then it puts dents in your wood. So I think this piece will actually help solidify the head to the piece, because it's going to kind of push up against the mallet head. We're going to wipe away that squeeze out so we don't have problems with that. And the sign that there's good contact with the glue is that squeeze out that you see there.